or even stop Brexit and could put the country's future at risk. Our political correspondent Ian Watson has our first report on another dramatic day in Westminster, and a warning it contains some flash photography.
The first clue that it really wasn't going to be business as usual in Downing Street. A lot was going on under the cover of darkness. The Chief Whip, Julian Smith, who's supposed to know if the Prime Minister has enough support to carry on, left number 10 late last night, and I spotted him again very early this morning. Soon after, we confirmed that the Prime Minister was facing a vote of no confidence. After dawn broke, the podium appeared. There would be a Prime Ministerial statement, but definitely not a resignation. And when Theresa May emerged, her message to her own MPs was defiant.
There will now be a vote of confidence in my leadership of the Conservative Party. I will contest that vote with everything I've got. A change of leadership in the Conservative Party now will put our country's future at risk and create uncertainty when we can least afford it. Delivering the Brexit people voted for. Building a country that works for everyone. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job.
But the trouble is, some people want to finish her political career. Watching was Owen Paterson, one of the MPs who signed a letter of no confidence. He said the so-called backstop to avoid a hard border in Ireland was unacceptable.
And her deal is absolutely appalling. We don't leave the customs union. I was in Washington recently. We won't be able to do trade deals. And the backstop is completely unacceptable, and it's quite unnecessary.
And some of her critics point out that under the Conservative Party's rules, if MPs don't dislodge Theresa May today, they're stuck with her beyond Brexit.
Today was inevitable. I put my letter of no confidence in back in July. It's disappointing we're here, but now we've got to deal with it. Colleagues have got to understand when they vote tonight, if the Prime Minister survives, she's got 12 months where she can't be challenged.
So there are many, many reasons, including public trust, as to the reasons why this vote of confidence is very necessary.
Downing Street's strategy is to get as many supportive voices in front of the cameras as possible before tonight's confidence vote.
The Prime Minister is the right person to take us forward. We need to give her our full support. I hope colleagues will.
What this vote today will do is flush out the extremists who are trying to advance a particular agenda which would really not be in the interest of the British people or the British economy.
And her predecessor tweeted his support, saying that any leadership contest would be a distraction. Downing Street will be arguing that there are already consequences from this challenge to the Prime Minister at a time when she should be negotiating with her European partners. She's had to cancel a cabinet meeting today and a meeting with her Irish counterpart, Leo Varadkar. A crucial meeting perhaps to try to get the reassurance that some of her own MPs want over the issue of the Irish backstop or how to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland.
Questions to the Prime Minister!
One thing in her schedule that wasn't cancelled was Prime Minister's questions. She had sidestepped a vote on her deal this week, but Jeremy Corbyn urged her to give MPs a say.
The time for dithering and delay by this government is over. The Prime Minister has negotiated her deal. She's told us it's the best and only deal available. There can be no more excuses, no more running away. Put it before Parliament and let's have the vote.
He should be honest with people. He should be honest with people about his position. He couldn't care less about Brexit. What he wants to do is bring down the government, create uncertainty, sow division and crash our economy. The biggest threat to people and to this country isn't leaving the EU, it's a Corbyn government.
And the SNP went further in their criticisms of the Prime Minister.
The Tory party is in chaos. The Prime Minister is a disgrace with their actions. The reality is that people across Scotland and the UK are seeing this today. Prime Minister, take responsibility, do the right thing, resign.
After PMQs, Theresa May's day is likely to get worse, because at 5 o'clock she effectively reapplies for her own job, talking to MPs in what's called the Backbench 1922 Committee. At 6 o'clock they vote on her future in a secret ballot. If more than half her parliamentary party, 158 MPs, vote against her, she'll have to step aside and a leadership contest begins. The Prime Minister's argument is that a change of leader could take so long, Brexit may have to be postponed. But today she had to postpone her own entry into Parliament when the gates didn't open. Some of her own MPs, of course, want her kept out of office permanently. Ian Watson, BBC News, Westminster.
So all eyes will be on the confidence vote tonight, which takes place between 6 and 8 p.m. 315 Conservative MPs will decide the Prime Minister's future. So what does Theresa May need to do to win tonight's vote among her MPs? Well, the Prime Minister needs the backing of a majority of Tory MPs to win. If all of them vote, that means she would need 158 votes. If she does win, she can't be challenged in this way for another year. But if she loses, then what happens? Well, there would be a leadership contest, and she would not be able to stand, but she would remain as Prime Minister until a replacement is announced. Tory MPs then choose two candidates, a series of ballots, to put forward to a vote of ordinary party members around the country. The candidates would be expected to take part in debates before the final voting deadline. If there's only one candidate, then that person becomes the new Conservative leader with no need for a vote from members. The winner of any Tory leadership contest would also be expected to become the new Prime Minister. But there's a worry that this entire process could take weeks, leaving the Brexit process even more uncertain. A leadership contest could delay the House of Commons vote on the withdrawal bill even further, potentially putting the Brexit deadline of the 29th of March in jeopardy. In a moment I'll be speaking to our Europe correspondent Kevin Connolly, who's in Brussels, to gauge reaction there. But first, our chief political correspondent Vicky Young is in Parliament, and well, it's all about the numbers once again, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, important to say that as far as public declarations go, the BBC has calculated that she has enough public declarations for MPs to win the vote this evening. But of course, it's a secret ballot. They may not do the same thing in private as they are saying publicly. Nevertheless, I think the most significant thing that's happened today is the briefing after Prime Minister's questions, where a Conservative Party spokesman talked about tonight's vote and said that Theresa May does not believe this vote today is about who leads the party into the next general election. It's about whether to change the party leader now. Now, that is highly significant because it suggests to me that Theresa May feels she has to make a pledge really to MPs that she will not lead them into the next general election in order to get their support. Now, how specific she is about that when she addresses the backbenchers at 5 o'clock before that vote will be very, very interesting. Will she be pushed by them to give a date for her departure? If she does, of course, that raises all sorts of issues, because as we know, when Prime Ministers say they're going to stand down, that makes it much more difficult to have authority over the party. And I think the second point to say here is that even if she wins tonight, where does that leave her Brexit deal? Because remember, that is what all this is about. Does it change the parliamentary arithmetic? No, it doesn't. Does it make it any easier for her to get a vote through Parliament? No, it doesn't. So it gets her through another day, but I'm not sure how it helps her in the longer term.
And what about the mood? Do you get the sense that those that are voting for her are not doing this out of any sense of affection, if you like?
No, and that's always been a bit of a problem for her, and this all stems back really to that decision she made, that unexpected decision to call that general election where she lost party their majority, and there are many who simply haven't forgiven her for that. There are some who think that, you know, her taking them into another election would be catastrophic. They don't feel that for whatever reason, you know, a lot of them would say yes, her determination, her hard work, her diligence is one thing, but the idea that she is the front woman for the party, going ahead into elections, selling a vision of a future after Brexit, they just don't see it. So I think a lot of today is about that they are willing to come behind her because they think the timing is terrible. They know that it looks terrible to voters who are thinking, aren't we in the middle of a crucial negotiation here? And they've decided to turn in on themselves. And of course, it's no good for the unity of the party, if there was any anyway, but this is just adding really to the hostility between different factions within the party, with the Chancellor saying that the people who are driving this are extremists. It's, you know, it's pretty tough stuff.
Vicky, thank you very much. More from her a little later on. Let's talk to Joey Jones, former spokesperson for Theresa May, and with me now. And I just want to pick up on what Vicky was suggesting from Downing Street there, their line that Theresa May will not fight the next election as Tory leader. What do you make of that?
Well, I think most of us would have assumed, and most Conservative MPs would have felt that she was very unlikely to have the opportunity to be allowed by her party to be the contender at the next general election. But she has done some interviews over the past few months where she intimated she might like to press on. Ultimately, it's giving a bit of ground. It will win a few people over to her, and it's basically about allowing her to fight another day.
Let's talk about the numbers tonight, because if she wins, even by one vote, you get the sense that she will regard that as victory and she will just plough on. But what does it do to her authority if the numbers are low?
So on the face of it, there are just two possible results, a win and a loss. And a loss, that's clear, she's out, and you've laid out the process that will go from that. Actually, I think there are a spectrum of different types of wins. There's a resounding victory that would actually improve her position.
What's the number she'll be looking at?
Well, in terms of the numbers voting against her, that would mean that you're basically getting your 48 and pretty much nobody else actually joining that ERG-led crew. Then I think there's a number. Initially this morning I felt as though the number was probably going to be up around 100, maybe now a little bit low. It feels as though the air's a bit going out of the balloon.
There's a bit of fizzle going out of this,
yes, and there's a bit of momentum running the Prime Minister's way for once. Nevertheless, I feel as though 80 to 100 will still be very difficult. More than 100 voting against her, that's an ugly win, and it would leave her in a situation where when she comes back with her New Deal refreshed and revitalised from the European Council meeting at the end of the week, or whenever the vote happens, and that gets voted down, because it will get voted down based on any projection at the moment, the Conservative Party would be left with the worst of all worlds. They'd be left with a bulletproof Prime Minister under the rules. She can't be touched for another year, and yet one whose authority had been shot to pieces.
And yet, won't she personally feel that by being bulletproofed, if you like, that she's put this away? She's put this threat, which will always be there, these people always muttering about sending letters, she's dealt with it.
Well, she's been hanging by a thread for so long, and today, in Prime Minister's questions, it was noteworthy that a lot of her most vocal opponents were very quiet. They were looking a bit cowed on the back benches, but there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes at the moment.
Come on, tell us
well,
what's
she
going
and
on
the whips will be talking to a lot of people, trying to win them round, and bluntly, can I say it, some of them won't tell the truth. Some of them actually won't be being honest. It's not quite like a FIFA election, but there will be a lot of
lie's
people.
A lie, Joey. But
there will be a lot of people who will be going out there. They might be standing in front of you in the minutes and hours ahead, saying that she has their full support, and then going into the privacy of a booth this afternoon and having second thoughts, perhaps. So there will be all of that sort of thing, and she knows, and her closest advisors know, that this is it's all in the balance. Today at PMQs, up in the parliamentary gallery, her husband, Philip May, he's never turned up at Prime Minister's questions to watch her before. That was in some ways the most noteworthy thing of PMQs. Why would he be there? It can only because he knows
it might
she
be the
knows
last.
it might be the last one.
So, language is very important. I just wonder, what did you make of the wisdom of Philip Hammond this morning, suggesting that, well, this is the moment to out the extremists, he called them, those Brexiteers?
That is inflammatory language, and it might rebound on him, and it might rebound on the Prime Minister that he is endeavouring to support. I think it is ill-advised, and it's a bit dangerous. There are people who are genuinely searching their consciences, soul-searching at the moment, and for them to feel as though if they were to go one way against the Prime Minister for what they would view as perfectly sincere reasons with the interests of the party and the country in their minds, and yet be labelled as extremists, that might just get their backs up, get their hackles up in a way that I'm sure the Chancellor would not have intended.
Talking to Michael Gove a little earlier, he says this is the moment we can just put this to bed, get on with the business. Well, the eye-rolling sort of does it. And anybody you talk to around here would probably eye-roll as well. I mean, where are we at the moment?
I think that we are going to be deep in a mess for the next few months. I cannot see how this can result in Theresa May's authority being sufficiently entrenched that she can bring a deal back to the Commons and win. I still think that's going nowhere. She's run out of road on that particular deal. I anticipate that at some point it's possible that the whole train set will have to be handed over to somebody else to have a go. All these people who are shouting from the sidelines, who are saying there's another route, there's another plan, we could do better than you. I suspect one of them may one day get what they are wishing for and have the opportunity.
Well, there's only one name that springs to mind on that basis, isn't there? And that's Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson is definitely, is first in mind. But there are a lot of people. At the weekend, there was a whole beauty contest going on. There were a bunch of senior cabinet ministers who were going out, and this was on a day where, at the moment, they're
name some names.
At the moment, they're queuing up
to
support the Prime Minister. But at the weekend, you saw Sajid Javid. He's in The Spectator today, of course, writing as well.
And had a meeting with Arlene Foster yesterday, which was interesting.
So, yes.
And talking about the backstop.
Yeah, and look, there are all sorts of people who are making sure that as Conservative MPs consider, or might consider, a next step, and, you know, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We will know a result at 9 o'clock. But if it goes awry for the Prime Minister, that as they consider a next step, that they are front of mind.
Joey, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Jerry Jones there on what is another remarkable day here in Westminster, and nowhere will they be watching events more closely than in Brussels. Let's go to our correspondent Kevin Connolly, who's there now. They're just going to be clustered around the television tonight, aren't they?
I think they will be, Simon, and it's watched with enormous interest here. A lot of people here know, of course, British politics very well. They feel they have to if they're going to understand how Brexit works. This is still seen as a pretty bewildering and extraordinary moment, of course, and there's no doubt that, you know, the theatre of British politics, the adversarial nature of it, is seen as fascinating here. Institutionally, things are a bit duller, of course. You are not going to get the President of the European Commission coming out and saying we want Theresa May to stay in office, and it would be a funny day in British politics if warm words from the European Commission were going to help you in an attempt to stay as leader of the British Tory party. But what they would say is that the deal which has been arranged so far, the celebrated withdrawal agreement, that declaration on future relations, that is not an agreement with Theresa May personally. That is an agreement with the British government, because the Cabinet signed off on it. So they would certainly deploy the legal argument that nothing changes if the leader is replaced. And the other point to make, of course, is this is a grouping of 28 democracies, soon to be 27. Leaders do come and go. Whoever turns up as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will simply be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Were Theresa May to lose, it's assumed here that she would still come tomorrow as a kind of caretaker Prime Minister. She, in that sense, will still be in office, although, of course, with diminished authority. So it's certainly seen as an interesting moment here. But the British idea that everything will change if you have a different leader, a different tone, a different strategy, that is not really accepted here. They say this is a complex negotiation which has involved 28 governments. Changing the leader of one of those governments, even if it's the one at the centre of the whole business, is not going to change as much as some British MPs might care to think.
Kevin Connolly in Brussels, thank you very much. Well, speaking to my colleague Andrew Neil, the International Trade Secretary Liam Fox said earlier that the Prime Minister's deal might not get the support of Cabinet if changes are not made to the backstop arrangement.
I think that it's very difficult to support the deal if we don't get changes to the backstop. I don't think it will get through. I'm not even sure that the Cabinet will agree for it to be put to the House of Commons.
Why is Downing Street calling Grant Shapps, telling him about progress on the backstop, and not calling its Trade Secretary?
Well, of course,
you told me earlier you didn't know.
Well, we were due to have a Cabinet meeting today, which has now been put off because we're in the middle of a confidence vote.
But would other Cabinet Ministers, if there isn't clarification or change on the backstop, would they not vote for it either?
Well, we're not expecting this process to be over. This is a process that the Prime Minister is in. Having listened to what the House of Commons said and listened to what the Conservative Party said, now out there trying to achieve those changes with our European partnership, should have been talking and going to see the Irish Prime Minister after Cabinet today. We're seeing an interruption of the process. I just think that people out there, our party supporters and people in the country will be saying, why, oh why, would the Tory party plunge itself into a confidence vote on the Prime Minister in the middle of a process which is clearly in the national interest and clearly in the party's interest?
Well, with me now, Amber Rudd, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Thank you for joining us. There is a sense in the country, if you listen to this morning, just picking up on what Liam Fox was saying there, that Tory MPs are putting party in front of the country, that this is, people are going to go in there voting for themselves and not for what's in the nation's interest.
Well, I'm sympathetic to the view that Parliament does not look like it's getting on with what we should be doing, which is governing, which is delivering on the EU referendum, and we have an ambitious domestic agenda led by the Prime Minister. And I can see that people look at us and think, what are they doing? Thinking about changing leader at a time of already high levels of uncertainty because we're in the middle of concluding these Brexit negotiations. So I'm sympathetic to that view, and the sooner we can scotch it by completing the action today and making sure the Prime Minister is reinforced in her place, the sooner we can get on with what the country wants us to do, which is government.
Do you agree with Philip Hammond, who used interesting language this morning? He said this is the moment to flush out the extremists.
Well, I would say that my colleagues have sincerely held views from the ERG, who have suddenly entered the headlines now, but they are different to mine.
Well, they're not just entering the headlines now. They've been there for an awful long time.
Yes, but people are much more...
This is a decade-old problem, at least.
It has been a problem for many years, but it's now much more evident the amount of differentiation there is in the party between what type of Brexit we want. I want to back the Prime Minister's deal, the Cabinet want to back the Prime Minister's deal, the majority of Conservative MPs do as well, but there is a group of Conservative MPs who don't, and they're the ones who've really led on starting this whole leadership fight today.
If she wins by one vote, does she still have any authority?
Of course she does. I mean, we are in different times now. You know, all those old conventions of if this happens, then that happens, have proven that they have gone out of the window. What we need is for the Prime Minister to win, for everyone to go back to delivering of what our constituents expect us to do. And there's just something too gleeful about some of my colleagues about today. We have a serious job to do. We have a serious responsibility in government, and the sooner we get back to remembering that and delivering on it, the better.
But one looks at the Prime Minister over the last year, that election disaster last year, which now means you depend on the DUP just to get a vote through in the House of Commons, to what happened on Monday, that last-minute decision to pull the vote on the Tuesday. Hasn't she created a lot of this mess for herself?
No, I think that this was inevitably going to be difficult. Leaving the European Union, which is what the outcome of the referendum was in 2016, was always going to be difficult. Difficult in terms of trying to get one position within the party, difficult in terms of trying to get one position in Parliament, and then making sure that we can negotiate that with the EU. There are so many different moving parts in this. I think a lot of people underestimated quite how difficult it was going to be. So I'm not really that surprised by the difficulties we've encountered over the past few months.
But the real difficulty is that the Prime Minister has the deal. She says there is no other deal. The EU says this is the deal.
Yes.
And yet she had to pull it because she knew she wouldn't get it through.
Yes, and she has done exactly the right thing because she's now trying to adapt it, trying to make sure that she can reassure my colleagues who have concerns about the backstop, and then I hope we'll be able to bring it back for the vote and win it.
But let's be realistic for a moment, because we've heard from Jean-Claude Juncker, we've heard from every major player, Angela Merkel. We cannot change this offer.
That's true.
So what? So because you say adapt. I don't know what adapt means.
The actual agreement, we have been told, cannot be. And I think that sounds like it's completely the case, because if you reopen it, then you might have to negotiate on other things, back to fishing, back to Gibraltar, these things in which we have a good outcome, which are confirmed in the agreement. So what she will get, I don't know, an addendum, a letter. The EU has all sorts of different language
for that. Well, the issue for many people is, that's all very well, but the backstop. If the backstop is brought into play, suddenly all bets are off, because those are the very agreements that, once again, those in the we're going to chip away at that.
No, because they have said, and I think the Prime Minister has agreed, we're not reopening the actual agreement. We're trying to get clarification that will reassure colleagues who are concerned about the backstop. Listen, it's going to be a compromise. Whatever she gets is not going to satisfy, I think, some of my colleagues, some of the people who object to it, to the backstop arrangements. But I'm hopeful that what she does get will give sufficient reassurance to the majority of my colleagues so they can support it when it comes through. But what my colleagues who want to oppose it need to think about is, what else? What else? What is their proposal, if not this? There is no other legally binding document on the table to deliver on the referendum.
The other question, of course, is who else? Your name pops up quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm not engaging in that sort of here, and I completely back the Prime Minister. I think it is ridiculous indulgence to think about a new leader at this time when we already have enough volatility in the country because of all these shenanigans.
But you know much better than I do that in the last few days some of your colleagues will be saying, well, I need to be ready if.
Yeah.
The beauty parade has already begun.
Well, I think they're making a mistake because we have a Prime Minister. She was elected by the party. She was elected in the last general election. It would be ridiculous to try and change leader at this moment, but particularly because we've got the volatility going on around Brexit itself. Just to throw into that a leadership fight as well is a mistake.
Downing Street briefing this morning suggesting that the Prime Minister will not be fighting the next general election. On that basis, she gets her agreement through, and it's a big if, when should she go?
Well, we've always said it's up to the Prime Minister. So if she's made that decision, she can clarify that whenever she wants to. She is our Prime Minister. It's going to be up to her to decide when she goes.
How do you think she's going to play the meeting at 5 o'clock, 1922 committee?
I hope she plays it as well as she played this morning's statement that she gave outside Number 10, when she really showed her passion for delivering for the country, her commitment to delivering on the referendum, and her strength of feeling about the domestic agenda. And I really hope that we can get back to concentrating on our domestic agenda, because that is what my constituents expect me to do.
Let's talk about your constituents very quickly, because out there, and as I say, listening to phone-in programmes on the radio, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of fear about where we are generally, but a lot of anger at your party. Why, when we're at a moment of national crisis, it's self-indulgence, and some of your own colleagues have used that phrase. Why, in the words of Lord Heseltine, when your party wants to change the song, they decide just get rid of the singer?
Yes, I've heard that comment from Lord Heseltine. Absolutely on the mark. And I think that anger is justified. We need to put this behind us. I hope that today will just be an example of an unfortunate, messy incident, but we can now get on with supporting the Prime Minister and trying to put some stability back into government, which is what people want.
Interesting in Prime Minister's questions today, up watching from the just above was the Prime Minister's husband. Doesn't normally do that. Is there a sense, do you think, that this could have been her last?
No, I think he's just being supportive of her. And, you know, those of us who know her and support her are doing exactly the same. We want to show her that she has support. We are part of her team.
And what's the risk if she wins tonight, but it's not a healthy win? What does that do to the Conservative Party tomorrow? What do you expect those that voted against her tonight to do? They're not going to make things any easier in future.
I hope that they will feel chastened by the experience of losing, and I hope that we'll then be able to think clearly about what we actually want to achieve. And I come back to the core point when addressing their opposition to the Prime Minister or the withdrawal agreement, is what else do they want to achieve? You know, if they want to leave the European Union, and most of these people are the Brexiteers who've been doing this for a long time, then what other a negotiable proposal that the EU will engage with and that will get through the House of Commons? I don't see anything.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if they're putting up tonight, if they lose, shut up from now on?
Well, I would say to my esteemed colleagues that when they lose tonight, they should consider coming back into the fold, supporting the Prime Minister and letting us get on with good government.
I just say, standing here, you seem very relaxed. You seem fairly confident about what's going to happen.
I am very confident of what's going to happen, yes. I think the Prime Minister is going to win well tonight.
Amber Rudd, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Right, plenty more to come from Westminster, but now, here on BBC News, time for a look at the weather. That's with Stav Daneos. Hello, Stav.
Hi there, Simon. Thank you very much. Now, this week so far has been pretty benign. Things are set to turn much colder to end the week. Thursday, Friday looking pretty chilly with frosty nights, and then something a lot more unsettled as we head on into towards the weekend. Now, there's a little bit of rain across western areas. That's because we've got low pressure across the North Atlantic, sending a few weather fronts our way, and it's been bringing rain to more western parts of the country. Towards the east, though, close to that area of high pressure, and largely fine and settled. We've had some lovely spells of sunshine across eastern parts of England, in fact. Overnight, it stays largely dry. Could be a few showers floating with eastern coastal parts of Scotland and England, maybe wintry over the higher ground, some spots of rain for Northern Ireland, but generally speaking, for most dry, variable cloud, where you get clear spells, it's going to be cold, temperatures just dipping close to freezing, so maybe a touch of frost. Now, as we head on towards Thursday, we've got high pressure to the east, low pressure to the west. This low pressure pushing against the area of high pressure, though, is likely to make a squeeze in the isobars, and that's going to do is increase the wind, and it's going to be coming in from the east or the southeast from a cold continent at the moment, so it's going to feel much colder tomorrow. On the plus side, though, it should be largely dry for most of the country because of that influence of high pressure. So probably more sunshine around tomorrow than what we've seen today. A few showers again across eastern areas, could be wind shear over the high ground, and perhaps again with this lingering weather front in the west, more cloud, spots of rain there for Northern Ireland. Temperature-wise, around 5 to 7 or 8 degrees. Add on the strength of the wind, though, which will be quite a feature. It's going to feel much colder, in fact, with temperatures feeling more like freezing to 3 degrees, so you really need to wrap up when you're heading out, despite all the sunshine around. And then through Thursday night, with clear skies and that cold air mass, it's going to turn very cold away from the far west, which will hold on to the cloud thanks to that weather front. So temperatures here above freezing across many central and western areas, though, of the UK. It's going to be cold with a widespread frost. So we start Friday off on a cold note, some frost around, but again another largely fine and settled day with quite a bit of sunshine, but still cold in that strong wind. And then it's all changed as we head through Friday night. So milder air trying to move in off the Atlantic. Is going to be a transitional period, though, with some wet weather moving northeastwards. And as it bumps into that cold air, we're likely to see some snow, not down on the hills, maybe down to lower levels for a time, before it all turns back to rain. But it's going to be very wet and windy across parts of England and Wales. So all happening really at the weekend. There could be some disruption from this snow, certainly Saturday morning, so stay tuned to the weather forecast.
Good afternoon from Westminster. Our main story is a challenge to the Prime Minister as Conservative MPs trigger a vote of confidence in her leadership. Theresa May says she'll fight with everything she's got to keep her job.
Sir Graham Brady has confirmed that he has received 48 letters from Conservative MPs, so there will now be a vote of confidence in my leadership of the Conservative Party. I will contest that vote with everything I've got.
At least 48 Tory MPs sent letters of no confidence required to trigger a ballot. The vote will take place tonight.
A ballot will be held between 6 and 8 o'clock, and we will count as soon as we can and provide a result as soon as we can after that.
Before that vote, Theresa May will address Conservative MPs at 5 o'clock, and she will be arguing that the new Prime Minister would be faced with the choice of delaying or even stopping Brexit. So that's the latest from here at Westminster. Plenty more to come, but now let's get the sports. That's with John Watson. John, hello.
Hello, Simon. Many thanks indeed. Good afternoon to you. We'll start with cycling. Sky are to end their backing. Cycling team, Team Sky, leaving its future in doubt. Their long-standing 10-year association will end in 2019 after a period of unprecedented success, winning 6 of the last 7 Tour de France titles. There have been controversies, though, with a parliamentary report concluding the team crossed an ethical line by using permitted drugs to enhance performance. Team principal Sir Dave Brailsford say they're open-minded about the potential of working with a new partner. Chris Froome said they plan to be here in 2020. Liverpool and Tottenham are into Monday's draw for the last 16 of the Champions League. Both secured the results they needed last night to reach the latter stages of the competition. Spurs drawing 1-1 in Barcelona, while the Reds beat Napoli 1-0 at Anfield.
I'm still full of adrenaline. I could feel it in bottles again. So this game was just amazing. It was outstanding, unbelievable. The boys played their whole heart on the pitch. I'm not sure if the right saying, but it's just that they were, with each part of their body, they were in that game.
I think the effort was fantastic. I think to celebrate our player inside with the staff, with everyone, I think after 4 years and a half on the club, I think it was the first time that you feel something special. The connection was amazing, and now we need to be clever in the way that we need to manage that energy that we create after tonight.
And it means 4 British sides have qualified for the last 16, including both Manchester clubs who play their final group games later. United face Valencia, while City are up against Hoffenheim. Raheem Sterling was named today as November's Premier League Player of the Month. A draw at the Etihad later will be enough to secure top spot in Group F.
We are in the next stage, that is important, and we want to win the game too, because we have every game try to win it and to finish first, just for the fact, you know, to finish first, because we never know, so it doesn't matter if you finish first or second. Last 16 is always tough. Have a little bit advantage for the second leg to play at home. But in general, in the next Monday will be a draw in Champions League. The big successor will be there.
And England's men's hockey team have made it through to the semi-finals of the World Cup. They beat reigning Olympic champions Argentina 3-2 in a thrilling match in India, with the scores level in the dying seconds of the third quarter. This brilliant long ball, Harry Middleton set up Will Calnan to put England in front. Argentina then levelled in the fourth from a penalty corner. Gonzalo Payat with his second of the match. But then, less than a minute later, England were back in front. Harry Martin sending them through to their third World Cup semi-final in a row. And that, Simon, is all from the BBC Sports Centre for now. It's back to you in Westminster.
John, thank you very much. John Watson there. And welcome back to a BBC News special from Westminster on another dramatic day in Parliament. In around 4 hours' time, Theresa May will face a vote of confidence in her leadership. The ballot was triggered this morning when the threshold of 48 letters calling for a vote was reached. Mrs May has warned that Brexit will be delayed or even stopped if Conservative MPs fail to back her. So, what can we expect later? Well, Mrs May will address the 1922 committee at 5 o'clock in what will be her last chance to convince any undecided Conservative MPs to back her as leader. Shortly after she finishes speaking, the ballot will be held. That's at some point between 6 and 8 o'clock tonight, with the result announced very soon afterwards. To win, Mrs May needs to secure 158 votes. That's half of her MPs plus one. If that happens, she will be immune from a further challenge for a year. But if she loses, there'll be a leadership contest, and she will be barred from standing. Senior members of the Cabinet have been quick to throw their support behind the Prime Minister. Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt said she's the best person to make sure we actually leave the EU on March the 29th. The International Trade Secretary Liam Fox said it was the wrong time for a leadership contest, saying the country expects stability and not damaging division. Meanwhile, the prominent Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was one of the first to submit a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister, said the country needs a new leader and that it's time for Mrs May to resign. The former Prime Minister David Cameron has since urged Conservative MPs to back Mrs May in the vote. Well, coming up at 3:30, we want to get your views. We're bringing you a BBC Ask This, your chance to ask an expert any question you have on the upcoming confidence vote in Theresa May. So do send your questions. All the ways to contact us are there on screen. Text us 61124, email askthis@bbc.co.uk or even UK, and you can tweet us on BBC Ask This. Just use that hashtag. Well, let's talk now to the Labour MP Liz Kendall. Not your... Who do you want to win it, though?
Well, the honest truth is, whether she wins or she loses, it's not going to change the fundamentals, which is that there is no backing for the deal that she's negotiated within Parliament. And the fundamental problem is this. If you want to protect jobs and have no border in Northern Ireland, you need to stay in the single market and the customs union. And what the Prime Minister's proposing is that we give up our say over all of those rules that govern our lives. You know, this deal isn't what people were promised, and whether she wins or she loses tonight, those fundamentals don't change.
Aren't we confusing the deal with our obsession with this backstop, which both Theresa May and indeed the EU have said they hope isn't put into use? If she can get some clarification, which is what she's trying to do, wouldn't that change the whole sense of what is on offer here?
Look, either you have to have a new treaty and relationship with Europe that delivers everything in the backstop in order to avoid a border in Northern Ireland, or you have to have the backstop. That's the truth of it. If you don't want a hard border, you have to be in the single market and customs union. Whichever way you cut the cake, the issue remains the same. And that's why I think, you know, most members of the public know we're facing this really crunch moment on Brexit and what do we do as a country. And yet what we're seeing is a Tory party devouring itself over its civil war, and that is not the leadership that the country needs.
It's a vote of confidence in her for the Tory party tonight. Do you have confidence in her as Prime Minister?
No, because the deal that she's brought back, I think, is bad.
So why isn't your leader,
economy.
why isn't your party now saying it's time for a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister?
Well, listen, the truth is, the reason she didn't put her vote this week is she knew she was going to lose it. She's not going to get any major changes from Brussels. So if she brings it back, she will lose it. I mean, I think it will be a matter of when, not if. You know, we want to see a general election, but if we don't get that, our policy is very clear that we need to put it back to the people in a public vote, and I think Remain should still be an option on the ballot paper.
But when parties like the SNP, Plaid Cymru, the four other parties in this place are saying, we will back you, the Labour Party, if you put up a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Why does Jeremy Corbyn seem to be shying away from this?
Well, look, if we're going to get a general election, which is the first thing that we want to try and achieve, there will have to be a vote of no confidence, and Jeremy Corbyn has said that's a matter of when, not if.
Well, is
but
that
ultimately,
weeks? Because the country's looking at feels a sense of crisis.
Well, they do. And what they want is an answer about
That's what
Brexit.
I want.
And my view about this is I think a public vote may be the only way out of this deadlock, because there's no majority in Parliament for any of the options. And I think this, look, what people were promised in the referendum is so very different from what we're seeing now. The facts have changed. It's a worse deal than we've got now, and the uncertainty is going to go on forever and ever. So I think the right option is, if we really want to have support for however we go forward, we are going to have to put it back to the people in a public vote.
So just so I'm clear, the only way you think that can be done is to call for a general election, then make it part of the Labour manifesto?
No, our policy says we want to see a general election, and if we can't get that, all the options remain on the table, including a public vote. I think that that's absolutely
What's the mechanics of that? How would that work in this place?
Well, in order to get a general election, you'd have to have a vote of no confidence. The leader of our party has said that's a matter of when, not if. But ultimately,
When? I keep
well, you'll
asking.
have to ask him that. You'll have to ask him that.
Don't you all discuss it?
Of course we do, but you know, those are private matters for discussion. But what I am most bothered about is, what do we do on Brexit? How do we move the country forward? And my view is that because what we're being promised now is so very different from what people were promised during the referendum, if we want to have genuinely public support for where we go next as a country, we need to put it back to the public for a vote.
What do you say to someone who's watching you right now and says, here you are criticising the Tory party for this infighting, a confidence vote this evening at a time when they should be concentrating on other stuff, and actually what you're arguing is exactly the same, which is, well, we're ready to pull the rug from under her?
No, I'm not arguing that at all. I'm trying to say that if what we want to do is set out a future for the country that protects jobs, that doesn't have a border in Northern Ireland, and gives this proud country a say over the rules that govern